Just a little bit of a warning, I do refer to schizophrenia with SZ on the PowerPoints. It does mean schizophrenia. Genetic explanation of schizophrenia. So the human genome has 23,000 sets of genes. Each have specific instructions that build up our unique being. Schizophrenia runs in families, and the more closely related you are, the higher risk you are of having schizophrenia. Genetic makeup is from both parents, about 50%, one from each parent. Therefore, if one parent suffers from schizophrenia, you have a 50% chance of that gene being passed on. There's a 48 concordant rate with identical twins, MZ, and if both parents are carriers of the schizophrenia gene, there's a 25% risk to you. There's a 6 to 17% risk if you have a first-degree relative who has schizophrenia. There's a 2 to 6% risk if you have a second-degree relative with schizophrenia, and there's a 1% risk to the general population of having schizophrenia. Genes involved with schizophrenia and the stress diathesis model. Genes involved. The DISC1 gene. This gene is involved in brain development and synaptic functioning, and mutations are associated with increased risk of schizophrenia. The NGR1 gene. This gene affects brain communication, and variants lead to schizophrenia. The COMT gene. This affects dopamine regulation in the brain, and if you've watched the neurotransmitter video, or if you're watching the long video, then you know too little dopamine can lead to negative symptoms, and too much dopamine can lead to positive symptoms of schizophrenia. The stress diathesis models. The genetic risk may be triggered by environmental factors, for example stress. Genes create a vulnerability, and the environment can activate it. Not everyone has risk genes to develop schizophrenia. Adoption and twin studies. If you don't know what these are, I suggest you watch my video on it, especially since I go over Gottman and Shield and gets in it. Adoption. This is when you compare biological and adoptive parents to their children. There's a 1 to 10% risk. Disorder is down to genetics. It can be expected that biological parents will share the disorder with their children they will not have raised. It's shown a concordance for schizophrenia is 4 times as high in MZ twins compared to DZ twins. Twins. Compare the variance between MZ twins 100% and DZ twins 50%. Argue that if one twin has this disorder, the other will suffer. If you are confused, please go watch the video on adoption and twin studies as I go over this in a lot more detail. Strengths. Genetic counselling, if diagnosed with schizophrenia, means that risk can be calculated and counselling can be put in place to aid the family. Harrison and Owens, 2003, found that risk was about 10% higher in close family members of schizophrenia. Harrison and Owens, 2003, found 6 different types of genes involved in the development of schizophrenia. Tark and Downhown, 2017, found that the DISC1 gene is associated with the presynaptic dopamine dysregulation explanation of schizophrenia. Michelle and Egan et al. Found a link between a decrease in dopamine activity in the prefrontal cortex and one form of COMT gene and 2 copies of it leading to schizophrenia. Gottman and Shields, 1991. I have elaborated further on this study in my twins and adoption video. However, Gottman and Shields showed that there was a concordance rate with genetics using twins. They found that MZ twins had a 48 concordance rate and DZ 17%. Although there's not a 100% concordance rate, meaning both nature and nurture must impact whether or not an individual develops schizophrenia. 7% of adoptees with schizophrenia had a biological mother with schizophrenia compared to 2% who had a biological mother without schizophrenia. Terriana et al. 2000 compared children adopted away from their biological mothers who had schizophrenia. However, they still had a higher rate of schizophrenia than the normal population. As well as this, the genetic explanation for schizophrenia reduces blame from the individual who's schizophrenic, who may feel like it's their fault for developing schizophrenia and their actions due to the schizophrenia. Weaknesses. Now, we talked about this with Gottman and Shield, but the concordance rate isn't 100%. Carson, Passman, and Passbean, Morstein, 2006, showed that cities led to schizophrenia and rural areas did not lead to schizophrenia. This suggests that there's more than just a genetic explanation for schizophrenia, and this explanation should be used alongside social reasons. Researchers failed to isolate a single gene, recessive or dominant, to explain schizophrenia. This is from Taminga, 1991. Adoption and twin studies often have small samples and therefore cannot be generalized. As well as this, twins have an unnatural life and therefore cannot be applied to the general population. It reduces the likelihood that behavioral treatments can assist an individual with schizophrenia. Ezra Susser and colleagues, 1992. Early perinatal nutrition can increase the risk of schizophrenia. It's deterministic to say that this is the only explanation of schizophrenia, and there's also other explanations, the dopamine hypothesis and the social causation hypothesis.